In recent years, resolution modification has been all the rage, especially as we try to push higher and higher pixel count monitors. 8K anyone? As games get more complex, pushing native pixel perfect resolution has gotten quite difficult. But we now have many opportunities to modify resolution to great effect thanks to some techno wizardry from the GPU makers. Technology like FSR, DLSS, and XeSS aim to provide higher frame rates with minimal impact to visual quality. Unfortunately, with a plethora of options, the choices can get quite murky. So in this video, I'm going to try and help you get a better understanding of these various techniques and provide some guidance on which one to use. So let's get started. Before getting into the thick of things, it's probably best to make sure you have a solid understanding of just what I mean by native resolution. The easiest way to explain it is simply the amount of pixels you've selected for a game to render on your graphics cards and output by your monitor. It's that simple. By selecting 1920 by 1080 in a game setting, you are telling the game to render and send a grid of pixels from your graphics card to your monitor that is 1920 wide by 1080 tall. Assuming your monitor supports 1920 by 1080, that means that you are seeing the same amount of pixels on your screen that the graphics card is spitting out. Nothing more, nothing less. Of course, there are many resolution combinations out there, but the point is that native means the game is rendering a specific amount of pixels and that you are seeing the same amount of pixels without any changes in between. The more pixels the graphics card is asked to render per second and spit out to the monitor, the more power it needs to output them at an acceptable frame rate. For example, a native resolution of 3840 by 2160 or UHD 4K is 8,294,400 pixels per frame. That's a lot of pixels that need to be rendered per frame, and you're probably going to need a very large and expensive GPU to spit out that many pixels for your desired frame rate. Or do you? Over the past several years, we've seen a rise of in-game renderer scaling. While this is the most simple and accessible option, it's also the least impressive. And what this option does is render the gameplay at a lower resolution and then scale it back to native 1080p, for example, without affecting things like heads-up display elements. Now, this scaling is often represented as a percentage modifier, so if you're telling the game to run at 1080p with a 90% resolution, then the game is actually rendering at 1728 by 972 and then scaling up the engine to output it at 1080p. By rendering the game at a lower resolution, it can scale up to native GPU, doesn't have to work as hard, meaning it can render more frames per second and give you a higher frame rate. Now, the great thing here is that a lot of games that offer the rendering scale, you might be hard-pressed to really see a difference visually, and it's worth the boost in frame rates. But as great of an option as this sounds, there are actually better techniques out there. One such technique is generally referred to as image sharpening technologies, and both Nvidia and AMD offer their own versions. Right now, Nvidia offers Nvidia Image Scaling, or NIS, and AMD offers Radeon Image Sharpening, or RIS. These techniques work very much like the in-game scaler, but have a bit of a twist and can work for any game. Rather than the game handling the scaling duties, the driver for either Radeon or GeForce will be doing the work to take the game's selected resolution and scale it back up and output it to your monitor. Once the resolution has been reduced from native in-game, the driver then takes a lower image and adds a sharpening layer back to the final image after it scales it to clean it up, if you will. Now, the catch here is that all aspects of the game will be running at that lower resolution, so expect the HUD and menu elements to be a little duller, or a lot duller, depending on how aggressively you lower the resolution. One step above pure sharpening techniques is something called spatial upscalers, and it's best represented by AMD's first-gen FidelityFX Super Resolution, or FSR 1.0. Now, this technique utilizes a fixed modifier factor in a game's menu, represented by a set quality levels for rendering resolutions. So instead of picking, say, 90% scale, you would generally pick the quality option, which is always a set percentage. After that option is set, the scaler employs an advanced adaptive edge sharpening technique along with applying post-processing effects before spitting out the gameplay and the HUD to the native final resolution. It is admittedly a little complicated to explain, and you can watch a previous video on the subject from our channel, but for the basic level, know that it's kind of like a combo between previous options. Now this is typically the best option I've mentioned so far as balancing fidelity and performance, but it can get even better. All the techniques I've gone over so far typically have a clear image degradation compared to native rendering resolutions. But more advanced technologies like DLSS, XeSS, and FSR 2.0 are where the GPU companies are working tirelessly to bring massive performance boost potential with an image as close to native as possible, and even better at times. So what's going on with these? Motion vector upscaling and reconstruction is the best and most simple way to explain what's going on here with these techniques. Like FSR 1.0, they all work off a scale factor from the native resolution and have settings like quality, balanced, and performance, so you won't be making any resolution adjustments outside of your final target resolution. Now, once you set that target quality level, the game then renders at a resolution set factor, and the graphics card will take the data given and upscale it while using those motion vectors to ensure as clean and high quality of a final render as possible. Now, mind you, the more pixels you give the GPU to work with, the better the outcome. This is why 4K gaming typically benefits the most from this, as it has the most amount of base pixels to work with at each quality level. Admittedly, each of these techniques work differently behind the scenes, and they're not quite the same and have a different support structure. AMD's FSR 2.0 takes advantage of motion vectors and temporal reconstruction on top of how FSR 1.0 works, but doesn't make use of artificial intelligence functions. Intel's XeSS does the same, but adds the use of AI to enhance the result. Something I'll be visiting on soon, so be sure to be subscribed to see that video when it hits. Now, Nvidia's DLSS takes things to a next level by being primarily machine learning AI boosted. But unlike FSR 2.0 and XeSS, this technique will only work with RTX cards. So, now that I've gone through all of the scaling options, which one should you use? It's really not a very difficult question to answer. Of course, it's native. You should use native when the performance is at an acceptable level for you. But you already knew that, didn't you? Well, if you need or want that extra performance, it's great to use the available upscaling options, but it's not always clear which to pick. Here's my quick guide. If you have an RTX card and DLSS is available, that's what you'll want to use. If you have a Radeon or a GTX card, then an FSR 2.0 would be the best option. Art cards can make use of FSR as well, but XeSS is available, then that's going to be your preferred route. Then from there, the image sharpening techniques would be optimal if none of these options are in the game, and that would be Radeon image sharpening or Nvidia image scaling. Lastly would be the in-game resolution modifier, and believe me, that's a last resort. If that's what you have to rely on, then I would recommend lowering some settings to, well, keep the native resolution to get a performance boost if possible. At the end of it all, scaling technology is a growing segment, with updates to existing and new technologies coming along regularly, like Unreal Engine 5 and its built-in temporal super resolution. Even that is a very similar technique to the way FSR 2.0 does its things, it's just without the AMD specific sauce. The point being is that going forward, you should at least have a better understanding of the different techniques that are starting to show up regularly as graphics options in the game. I was quite surprised when I fired up Modern Warfare 2 for the first time and saw pretty much every option available in the game. Had I not been keeping up with the latest, then I might have been sitting there scratching my head over what all these options were. Well folks, I hope you got something out of today's video and are leaving feeling a bit more certain about what all these non-native options are. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and make sure you're subscribed here at PCWorld for even more hardware and software goodness.